I used to get people who, when I would call during follow-up, I used to call people all the time to, just to see how they were doing and to offer them support, so they'd be able to stay off. This is long before the internet, long before there was any other way to really, I feel, have any kind of personal contact with people. I would just call them. Every now and then I'd call someone to ask how they were doing, and they would say, they're doing okay. They're not buying cigarettes. And as soon as I heard this, I got a smoker at the other end of the phone. I probably have someone who's chain smoking at the other end of the phone, but who's rationalizing that they're actually doing okay because they're not buying cigarettes. Now, I love the way some of these people pull that off. There were some people who were smoking very significant amount of cigarettes without buying themselves cigarettes. And that was the key to how they did this. They used to borrow cigarettes in the beginning. They borrowed from everybody they could get. Now, I got to point out, in the early days, this wasn't that hard. When there was so many people smoking around them, they could, bum one or two off, maybe 10 different people. But as time went on, this was getting pretty hard to do, to find that many people who you knew who were still smoking and who would give you cigarettes every day. Well, the technique that some of these people pulled off is they started buying cigarettes for friends. They'd buy whole packs. They'd buy cartons for these people. And then every now and then they would start borrowing them back. And this is how they would say, I wasn't buying cigarettes. I wasn't buying it for myself. They were just borrowing cigarettes, and they felt that somehow they were, no longer really dealing with the problem. These people were spending so much money. Now, that's true, cigarettes were cheaper back then, but they were spending a small fortune. Now, you got to understand, the friends loved it. The friends were, they're getting tons of free cigarettes. So this, poor person who was borrowing back every now and then, they were still getting a great deal over a year. But it's one of those games that people played, trying to convince themselves that they didn't really have to smoke. They didn't really have a problem. Come on, they're not buying themselves cigarettes. It's a game that people played. People used to play lots of games. The one I joke about is how sometimes you'll get people who say, well, they're only smoking after meals. That one worked. That one was impressive how people pulled that off. They'd work themselves up to 10 or 20 meals a day, and then life became pretty comfortable for them. Again, it was a game. It was a game that people were trying to do, trying to make them think that they didn't have the problem that they did. You've got to remember smoking the way it was. You got to remember it in its entirety. And if you played these kind of games, you want to remember that you did it. You want to show the level of insanity that you seem to work with, trying to make something rational, smoking, which is totally irrational when, analyzed with all the problems that went with it, the social, the economic, the medical, the risks, just the whole package deal of smoking. It just wasn't worth it. And the more you remember it for what it was, the more you remember your own behaviors when you did things like this for what they were, the more you'll realize that you don't want to be under a control of a substance like this again. And the more committed you're going to stay to never take another puff.